I think that selling is an incredibly challenging profession. Very, very difficult to be great at it. And yet, a lot of people think selling's actually pretty easy. Well, I want to take a look at why I think selling might possibly be the most difficult role in the company. And I also want to take a look at how many companies make it way harder than it should be. This is Sales Untraining, a very different kind of sales podcast. 3 out of 4 salespeople are failing. They're falling short of their revenue. Why doesn't sales training work? That's what this sales podcast is about. It's your weekly sales strategy guide designed to rewire your sales brain. Welcome to Sales Untraining. I'm Kelly Riggs, and it is great to have you on this episode of Sales Untraining because this is episode number 104, which would be exactly 2 years of your weekly sales strategy guide designed to completely rewire your sales brain. 104th episode. Pretty proud of that and excited you're here. Hope you will share this with someone who leads a sales team. Maybe they can be a part of the conversation. How do we improve sales training dramatically in order to help our salespeople thrive out in the field? Well, the challenge that you have is there's about 10 or 12 systemic problems that we have to deal with. But before we get there, hey, if you can take a moment and like and subscribe to the podcast, that'd be absolutely amazing. Look forward to seeing you in the future. Hey, are you a first timer? Welcome aboard. A lot of great episodes in the past. Just wrapped up a big series on listening. You may want to check that one out and have had a number of phenomenal guests. You can go find them. And I'm looking at having a couple of more premier guests in the very near future. So look forward to that. Hey, let's talk about how difficult selling is. Now, listen, I don't want to do this merely as some sort of theoretical thing and argue about which job's more important and all those kinds of things. No, the conversation actually started with some banter I had with a friend on LinkedIn about, is selling complex? Is it hard? Is it difficult? What kinds of challenges do you have? And in my mind, there's actually only one position that's harder than salesperson. Now, I'm not going to tell you what that position is because I don't want you to get sideways yet. Let's stick to this one. But selling is extraordinarily difficult. It is tough to be great. And what I want to do is go through a half a dozen reasons why I absolutely believe that that's true. But listen, the reality is the uninformed public who has only a very surface notion of what salespeople do tend to think that, well, selling is really easy. I mean, you just show up and talk a lot and have long lunches and play golf and, you make a ton of money, and they really can't understand what that's all about. Why would you make all that money if the job's that easy? Of course, that makes zero sense. If it was easy, anybody could do it. And if anybody could do it, it certainly wouldn't pay what it pays. Doesn't make any sense at all. But the average person on the street, in fact, I got to tell you, when I was a young sales guy starting out, there was a real stigma built around selling that sort of said, if you can't do anything else, what you do is you get a job as a salesperson. So you're not a trained professional, fill in the blank, architect, engineer, accountant, attorney, doctor, whatever the case may be. You don't have that skill working for you. You didn't go to school and learn those things. So we're gonna try some other things. And if you're not in the trades, construction, carpentry, electrical, welding, all that, well, then you don't have that going for you. So you get into some softer things like marketing or communications, or you do something with your business degree. You took a business in college and you've got a management emphasis, so you get a management role. Well, if you can't do any of those things, or you didn't finish college, or you hated college and you don't have a resume, what do? Oh, yes, you go into selling. And of course, the thing is that car sales was sort of the poster child. Well, I couldn't get a job anywhere else, so I went down to the local car dealership that churns salespeople. by the dozens, and they're hoping that 1 out of 20 or 30 is pretty good, and they'll keep them, and they're just turning them over. And so the used car salesperson or the door-to-door salesperson, you know what I'm talking about, right? The profession suffers from a much maligned reputation, well-deserved in most cases. But that was the thing, right? So people are like, listen, the only thing you need to have to be good in selling is you've got to be an extrovert. You've got to have a personality. You got to have the gift of gab. You got to be able to, talk paint off the wall, which is shocking because it has absolutely nothing to do with anything. In fact, what's ironic is that the thing that people complain about the most in terms of their dislike of salespeople is, yep, you guessed it, they talk too much. Which, of course, as I've talked about in past episodes, is, well, it's an outgrowth of how we train salespeople. We train them to talk, and then we wonder why they do so much of it. And they don't listen well, which I've covered in the past 3 episodes of Sales Untraining. Hope you'll check that out. Well, all of these things really got me lit up a little bit this week because we had this conversation, how difficult is selling? Well, I think the difficulty scale on 1 to 10, selling's a 12, maybe a 15. And I want to go through all the reasons why I think that is absolutely the case. I mean, there's a number of reasons why. First off, very, very simply, I want you to stop for a minute. You're multitasking while you're listening to me. Now, if you're on a bike or a treadmill or something like that, hone in, focus here. If you're watching on YouTube and you're typing emails, stop for a second. Just you can go back to multitasking here in a minute. Think of all the things a salesperson has to learn in order to be effective in the field. All right, stay with me. First off, just as a starter, they've got to learn everything about your company's systems and processes. They've got to go through the entire notion of getting onboarded and getting all their, passwords and entry codes and all of that. They got to learn how to operate your CRM system. If they've never used it, they've got to get reacquainted. They got to get logged in. They got to get signed up. They got to do all that. They've got to learn what's important to you. What fields have you added, and what do you value, and what needs to go in there, and how often. And if they've never done your CRM package, it takes a while. Now, they also have to learn your workflow process. How do you do quotes? How do you do estimates? How do you place orders? How do you fulfill requests from customers? How does the paper flow? What do I have to fill out? What sequence? All that has to be learned. And they have to learn all the electronic stuff that you have going on. They got to get familiar with Teams or whatever platform you're using, Slack or something else, and how to interact with every other person in the company. They've got to learn the critical people in each department. Now, some of you are going, so what? So what? It takes time. So what? It takes time to get all those things. Yeah, they may seem mundane and not that important, but when it comes time to be out in the field and to know who to call and why and when and what questions to ask, that stuff becomes fairly critical. Now, number 2, yes, they have to learn at least one set, primary set perhaps, or in your case, maybe you think they have to learn all of your products. They have to learn products, and they have to learn product applications and how they work and how we deliver them and how they get installed and how we in-service them and what role I play in that process, and on it goes. But I've got to become, at some level, capable of answering questions intelligently about one or more product lines and be able to make application and troubleshoot and understand how they work in every particular situation, or at least the big bell curve applications, number of applications of our product into clients' businesses. Got to learn all that stuff. Well, that's where you spend most of your time. So I assume yeah, that's an uphill climb. Never really thought about the first one, but yeah, they've got to learn all that stuff. Well, number 3, they've got to learn the industry. They've got to learn the language. They've got to learn how the competition and how all of those things fit together and impact the sales process. And they've got to learn to apply knowledge from the industry and the applications in the field and speak the language intelligently. Example I always used is, I spent 9 years in orthopedics. Well, you've got to learn to speak orthopedic. You've got to know the difference between orthopedic and arthroscopic, or you're going to sound like an idiot. And if, heaven forbid you say arthropedic or orthoscopic, as I've heard people do, and you don't know how basic biomechanics works and physiology and what happens in an operating room and all the language that's used by doctors. If you can't talk to a doctor, you lose credibility. Well, that's true probably in most every industry out there. Well, all of those things. And then on top of that, you've got to learn baseline selling skills. So there's got to be time and energy applied to learning selling skills. You've got to learn how to go through a sales process and plan sales calls and do discovery and do follow-up and presentations and prospecting. And you get the idea? I mean, let's be clear here. This is a lot of things to learn just to be baseline effective in the field, i.e., you can go out in the field and at least knock on a door, have a conversation, call on a decision maker, and at least sound like you know what you're doing to some degree. I mean, you don't have to know everything. You can't automatically have 10 years of experience and be able to answer very, deep problem type questions. No, not at all. But you have to learn a certain amount of things just to be able to function in the field. And that's just one reason it's so hard. Well, let's look at some other reasons. Number two, this is a big one. This is an extraordinarily complex environment that salespeople operate in. Every opportunity is different. They have different ways of buying products. They have different buying processes. They have different levels of decision makers. Some people have one or two. Some people have committees. Some people have far more influencers than users, some more users than influencers. And you've got all the political dynamics that are involved in making decisions. And every single account, every single prospect that they walk into is different. And people are different. So let's just layer that in, is that people have different personalities and they have different filters and baggage and issues and the way they think and feel about salespeople. You are walking into a very volatile, complex, uncertain, ambiguous playing field. Imagine you go out to play a game of some kind, and every time you play it, it's wildly different. The rules change. The way you score changes. The way you approach the game changes. The makeup of the personnel on each team changes. That's not completely unlike what selling is. It's extraordinarily difficult. And you think, well, if I master sort of an approach and I know what questions to ask, then I can use that approach on everybody. And yet, that's not true. Different people react in different ways to different types of questions. Everybody has different perceptions and different problems and different challenges. And we're trying to teach salespeople some sort of modular way of doing things. You do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you get to a certain point and you get a sale. The linear sales process that we take buyers right down this process, right down this avenue, and it happens the same way every time. It's not true. It's not true. I know it's not true. How in the world do you train a salesperson to deal with that level of ambiguity and complexity? How do you do it? Well, the fact of the matter is we don't. The vast majority of people don't train salespeople to be able to adapt, to think on their feet, to pivot when necessary, to listen at the level that they need to listen. So they're picking up the subtleties and the clues, and they're diving deeper with real tactical curiosity into issues that to the average salesperson just goes right over their head. I've dealt with this in a lot of previous episodes, but most salespeople are just listening for a clue of what they can sell, and then they start selling. So they start talking, they take over. And it's if you're going to be an elite salesperson, defined at least in the top 25%, top 20%, then you're going to have to be much, much better than most people are today. Because the reality is the vast majority of salespeople are just really average or worse. In fact, 1 out of 4, according to the data, hopeless. I mean, they're just never going to be any good. And this is part of the reason why. Number 3, I want you to think about how difficult it is first just to get a deal, just to get to the point where you can get in the field so that you can talk intelligently, so that you can take people through a process, so that you can finally find out what's truly important to them. And they say yes. They say yes to the deal. You want a deal. And then what happens? Well, now salespeople have to depend on 2, 3, 4 other departments in the company that could easily drop the ball. Tech support, engineering, operations, manufacturing, warehouse, laboratory. I mean, there's all of these different support functions that I can do my job very, very well, and we can still lose. Now, think about that. Think about if you do your job, whatever it might be in a company, and yet there are still a number of people in the company that could drop the ball for you. Now, yes, you can make the argument that's true for everybody. But listen, when it comes down to it, the reason, number 4, that it is so incredibly difficult is because salespeople are the most visible people typically in the company. Numbers are public. They're posted. We know how people are doing. And when we don't get a deal, they don't really care that manufacturing missed a deadline, or we couldn't deliver on our lead time that we said we were going to, or we made any one of 3, 4, 5 customer support or service mistakes. Nobody cares. They look at the salesperson and go, yep, they didn't hit his number. So that constant pressure, that constant constraint of you must win, you must be successful, is another thing that makes it so hard. Because listen, you and I know, as professional salespeople, leaders of professional salespeople, mindset might be the most difficult thing in this profession. And again, it's one of those things that we don't spend a whole lot of time with. Well, number 5, how about competition? I mean, it's not like I go out and do all of the things that I just described and do it in a vacuum. No, I have resistance. I have people fighting back. I have people changing the game. I think I've got a deal and somebody comes in and drops their number dramatically, and the prospect customer comes back and says, well, I can buy it for 15% less now because your competitor just decided they want this business worse than you do, which of course is not true. It's because they don't know how to sell, but that's another story. But the competitive pressure is overwhelming. They come out with a new product, a better product, a more innovative product. They've got better, slicker marketing. They've got lower prices. They've got better customer service. And it just takes one of those to get a customer's attention, divert their attention, and suddenly now winning a deal is infinitely harder than I thought it was before. So you've got all of those things, those 5 big reasons. And then on top of that, I've got to have a skill set that it would make a doctor envious. Well, I mean, maybe I exaggerate a little bit, but listen, it is no easy thing, no easy task to navigate that whole sales gauntlet in a way that you can be consistently effective. You've got to learn consultative selling, how to actually ask good questions, dive deeper, stay in the moment, listen effectively. You've got to be doing that with the right people. So you've got to identify and qualify decision makers, and you've got to understand their buying process, and you've got to have the capability to sell value and not just price, and on and on and on it goes. Listen, if you don't think selling is difficult, you don't understand the profession. Now, I'm not making excuses. That's exactly why salespeople get paid what they get paid. I had a sales manager when I first started in selling as a very young 20-year-old guy. And he said, let me be clear about selling. It is the highest paid hard work there is. It's also the lowest paid easy work there is. In other words, there's a correlation between how hard something is. Are you disciplined? Do you practice? Are you always perfecting your craft? Are you making the calls? Are you prospecting? If you are, then that hard work is going to translate into high pay. But if you're not doing those things, then you're not going to make a whole lot of money. The job's going to be a lot easier, but you're certainly not going to make a whole lot of money. All of this perhaps explains in a nutshell why only about 5% of salespeople are elite. I mean, number crushing salespeople. 1 in 20, that's not very high. And when you consider that 3 out of 4 typically are not doing that well, then you can understand why it is as difficult as it is. Why else would you have a 75% average or worse rate? That doesn't make any sense if the job is that easy. Well, coming up next, as hard as selling is, and I hope by now you agree that it is really, really difficult, I want to show you how companies make it way harder than it should be. Stay with me. Hey, thanks for making Sales Untraining your first listen of the week. And if you find something you like, if you hear something that's interesting, I hope you'll share it with somebody you know. You can find out more about me at bizlockerroom.com or email me, kelly@bizlockerroom.com. Now back to the show. Great salespeople tap into this and understand that if I can help people assuage their fear, if I can help them deal with risk, if I can help them deal with change, if I can help them feel comfortable, feel like they're making a great decision that's going to elevate their standing in the company, whatever those motivations are, motives for action that are driven by emotion, then you have a much greater opportunity to make a sale, almost without exception, because people buy emotion. Welcome back, Sales Untraining. I'm Kelly Riggs. Episode number 104 as we wrap up 2 solid years of Sales Untraining and pivot next episode to starting the 3rd year. Really excited about that. And I want to say a very special thank you to my producer, Doug Branson, who takes some raw material that is not that good and turns it into something that it is at least marginally listenable. Okay. Doug, I appreciate all the work you do behind the scenes. Listen, we're talking about how difficult the sales profession is. And, one of the challenges, you could even add it as another reason why it's so hard, is because you typically walk into most scenarios with 2 strikes against you. I mean, if you're a baseball player, at least you start the count at 0-0 and you get some balls and strikes to work with. In sales, many times you step up to the plate and you've got an 0-2 count. I mean, you're already back up against the wall. Why? Because people don't like salespeople as a general rule. I'm not talking about personally. They dislike the notion of salespeople and what they represent and how they do things, and their sort of selfish demeanor, and they care about getting paid, and they're just there to sell something, which, by the way, is the number one reason how companies make this so much harder. I mean, as difficult as this job is, reason number one that you make it more difficult for your salespeople is you perpetuate the negative stereotype of talks too much, only interested in themselves, not really interested in me, doesn't actually find out what's going on with me. How do you do that? Well, in your training, your whole approach is to teach product. And you're constantly telling your salespeople that your product is the best, the most innovative. We have the best service, the best quality. We've got more, big logos than anyone else. We've been around 40 years, blah, 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 blah. Sounds like everybody else. So if they start hearing that in the first 3-4 minutes of a conversation, they very quickly come to the conclusion, same old, same old. It's another salesperson. And people don't like salespeople for a reason. I mean, it's not some vague notion. It happens so much that it creates a generalization. And what that means is that generally, it's absolutely true. And until you take a really strong look at how you develop salespeople, how you train them to do their jobs, then you're going to continue to contribute to the difficulty of them being effective at what they do. Reason number 2 we make it very difficult is many times expectations are way out of line relative to your preparation, the amount of preparation that you provide. I mean, I've dealt with companies for 20 years now in the role that I have now at Business Locker Room. I mean, companies think that salespeople ought to be able to get out in the field and do some good at 2 weeks. Sometimes in a week. Seriously. You may be laughing, but seriously. People say, we bring them in, we do a full 5-day high-intensity, immersive training, and we get them out in the field. We hire good people. We hire strong people, and they've got great resumes and, blah, 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 blah. Okay, tell me how that's working out. Let's look at the data, and you tell me what's your turnover rate. As I've mentioned in a previous episode, those same people cannot tell me with any sort of consistency or predictability how long it takes to get someone up to break even, to actually be making money for the company, how long before they can act out in the field on their own without support. This is a very difficult job without us making it 10 times harder by almost telling people that you have to play the game with one hand tied behind your back and blindfold on, which is pretty much how we approach the training process many of the times. Number 3, the training that we do provide does tend to be quite sporadic, intermittent at best, usually one-off at a sales kickoff meeting. So we're not getting that constant improvement that we're looking for. And by the way, as an aside, when we do one of these one-off training exercises, the vast majority of times, it's not being reinforced in the field. We're not practicing it. We're not developing a disciplined habit to execute it. So within a week of that sales kickoff, people have forgotten the vast majority of what they learned. It's hard enough to be a salesperson, but to come into a company and to have expectations way out of line with the amount of preparation that I get to be good at it, and that the way you train me handcuffs me to go out and meet what most people see as a generalized thought process about salespeople, i.e. they talk too much. And on top of all of that, you don't train me enough, consistently enough to help me get better and better. One of the things that comes into play that makes it so difficult is that my mindset, my emotional responses, my attitude about my job vary widely. They suffer dramatically. Because salespeople, like all competitors, and if you're not a competitor, you have no business being in sales, but salespeople, like all competitors, want to win, and winning breeds confidence and the ability to do things well. Even if you're not hitting the ball as well as you can, you're like, my mechanics are good, I'm swinging the bat well, I'm seeing the ball well, it's going to happen. That confidence is incredibly important for salespeople to be able to function. Well, as we close, no, I'm not giving your salespeople a pass. No, I'm not trying to say, hey, it's not their fault. It's so difficult. They can't do their job. So Kelly, you think we shouldn't be so hard on them. No. Let's be clear. I'm being hard on you. I am. Sales leader, it's your fault. Every problem is a leadership problem. What I'm asking you to do is to rethink how you can change these things so that you can better prepare your people to overcome the adversity that exists in the workplace as a salesperson. I'm Kelly Riggs. This is Sales and Training. I'll see you next time.
Sales on Training is a production of Business Locker Room and Pod About It Productions. Music and editing by Doug Branson. To get more Kelly, visit bizlockerroom.com.